Blessings everyone, and welcome to Into the Mythica. I'm Peter Fay, and this is From the Quest. So, I just got back to my house and I turned on the computer and I saw a YouTube video that featured Deepak Chopra talking about the idea of abundance and how he went into a whole thing about how, we are this, and then in our biology, ripped, and then in our biology we are, yogi's clothes are not always like in the highest quality, man. You're in it. But he went talking about like where your body and yourself, and then he broke it down into like, the biology, and then into the cells, and into like with the organisms. And he was talking about this and bringing it back to how when we go through our embryonic cycle in pregnant, when we're a fetus, right? That we go through the actual evolutionary cycle of life, and that we have the qualities of the monkey and the qualities of the snake genetically in ourselves. And he tracked it all the way back to we are actually partially constructed of the stardust of various stars from different points in the universe. And he used this to segue into a discussion on identity. And it was in service to the idea that what we experience in the world is a construct of our mind based on base elemental sensations. And this is straight up yoga. It's what I'm saying into the Mythica, and what any, not spiritualist, but subtle architect, subtle alchemist, whatever, any being who really takes the time to really look into the substance of their story will eventually see that their story is made of the elements, or made of the perception, the sensation of the elements, that then have layers and layers and layers of human constructs built on them. This is classic yoga philosophy, and it is absolutely part of the thing that I'm expressing with Into the Mythica. And he tied this into abundance by saying that when you are identified or understand that you are the universe itself, the abundance that can flow to you is unrestrained by the constructs of personality, which is basically saying you're liberated from the constructs of personality. This is not an easy state to attain. And it's fascinating to me because, full transparency, I've just gotten back from the quest 3 years ago, and I am just getting into the social media, so I'm kind of the witnessing of what's going on, what the alchemy of things is, of getting to that place, of understanding what that place is about, and how that relates to what I'm presenting. This is significant because what Deepak Chopra was saying is absolutely, I am in complete alignment with. This has been my direct perception in the Akasha as to the substance of the self. When I talk about the layers of the land, the terrasphere, the mythosphere, the nemosphere, the akasphere, and the aethersphere, and their parallel relationship to the layers of the mind, the conscious, subconscious, collective unconscious, Akashic consciousness, and the elements of mind, I'm expressing my own version of the idea that we are made of stardust and of the elements. We're made of the ethers of stardust, the elements of the earth, come together into these forms and personalities that are then experiencing our unique story. Where the Mythica theology, or the Mythica cosmology, approaches this idea from another angle, one that I assert is relative to the emergent trend of stepping into one's highest self, of stepping into one's highest, most awakened, most embodied version of themselves, and how our stories play out as these elemental beings made of stardust, layered with the stories of personality, living in the conditions of our lives. And for me, this aspect of delivering not only how those various worlds that exist as human constructs exist in our mind and their relevance to our personal alchemy, but also how they form the landscape of our stories here on the earth. So what I'm delivering is tangential to what Deepak is delivering. It's made of the same substance, but I'm approaching the nature of being and becoming from something that speaks to the nature of those constructs of identity and how they play out in the geometry of our stories. And the reason I started this was because, what Deepak was saying is absolutely true from a yogic standpoint, or from my standpoint as well, structurally. What I'm getting at is that because my devotion was to the divine emanation of story, where I'm doing this video right by the library, everything that occurs on my path has been filtered through the lens of story, in the sense that what he's saying is filtered through the lens of that kind of interpretation culturally. The underlying thing here is that in the Mythica, what I'm saying is that there are certain physics to how the elements of ourselves intersect with each other in the geometry of our stories, and how this relates to the very definition of our life quest itself. This is looking at the nature of being human, being mortal, encountering other people on our quest. So in this context, just to say, as I was doing this video, I saw this gentleman named Hayden writing a poem, and I came over and I talked to him for a moment because, well, I'm a poet, warrior, bard myself, so it's like he got that. And he was kind enough to let me read his poem. And so I'm going to do this, and it says, "Here we are, dreaming the dream that dreams itself. We are the dream. We're in the dream. Reflections refracting reflections from all angles and from all times. Everything magnifies, manifesting multifarious multiplicities. Moods melt, morphing into many modulations. Expansion consumes, growth blooms, possibilities proliferate." This was beautiful. And he was kind enough to let me use it. And when we talk about the Mythica, we're talking about the idea that why would an example of the geometries of story that I'm teaching to help give context to the journey of the self, why would I run into another bard here in the library at this exact moment? A perfect example of what I'm saying into what we might call the karmic gravities, the gravities of synchronicity, the way in which our characters arrive in each other's stories. This, in essence, is where the idea of the self and the looking at the self as a means of changing one's identity meets what Deepak was saying, meets the structural way in which our timelines intersect with each other for the resolution of various patterns which are made of the elements themselves and are dressed up in the costumes and cultures of our personalities. From my perspective, understanding both of these things is what gives us a holistic look at what it means to be living on our heroic journey. It gives us a way of looking at the journey of self and the journey of identity in terms of the people, the places, and the events that arrive on our quest in synchronicity, which are undoubtedly the elements having a relationship through the costumes of consciousness. Yet it is those costumes of consciousness that make up our characters on the world stage and which form the basis of the great story of life herself. Thank you. I'm Peter Fay. May you live your myth.